Hey everybody, this is Jimmy Tingle. Welcome to the Jimmy Tingle Show, appropriately named, I think. This is our first episode of our video show and podcast, and I couldn't be happier today to introduce my first guest. My friend Colin Quinn and I go way back. We go back to the 1980s in the comedy clubs in Boston and in New York. I got to meet him way back in the day. He was a big influence to me, a good friend, and we've been friends ever since, going back, whatever that is, 35 years, 40 years, whatever it is. But he's done a lot of great things. You may know him as from Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live. He's been in a ton of movies, and he's been pursuing the one-person show format for the last, 20, 25 years or so, and he's done a ton of them, or not a ton, but he's done several, and they're all great. And I want to talk to him about that because he's in Boston this Thursday night doing his show at the Wilbur Theater. So please welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, from New York City, Mr. Colin Quinn.
Yes. Hi, Jimmy. We first met, I saw Jimmy Tingle. They go, you got to watch this guy, Jimmy Tingle. And I was up here at Boston in one of these clubs. And he goes on stage and he goes, folks, I'm the Pink Wonder. And then a minute later, he goes, the Czar of Watertown. And the crowds look at him. He had like 10 nicknames that he gave himself. He just got his haircut. He goes, folks, Spike Tingle. And it was the funniest, it was a hilarious act, but it was just, he was very unique. I knew from the beginning. I said, this guy's really great.
He's really great. A man of many nicknames.
Yes, he gave himself like 8 nicknames during that set. Really.
Well, Colin, I used to, when I was trying to get booked at the Ding Ho, Barry Cremens, I was the daytime bartender and open mic performer. I said, Barry, why don't you book me? He goes, Jimmy, I can't tell Stephen Wright and Lenny Clark and, Paula Poundstone not to come in on Saturday night because we're going to book Tingle. He goes, you got to start your own room. Start your own room. You can book it. You can host it. You'll get all sorts of practice. He said, and so I found that room in Watertown, Mark's Pub in Watertown, and I think it was Lenny or Barry nicknamed me the Czar of Watertown because you didn't get into Watertown, Massachusetts unless you went through me. So that's how I got that nickname. But I think that whole idea of creating your own gigs, taking the initiative on your own, is something that I'm still doing with this podcast and TV show. And you've still been doing. I mean, you've been doing for many years with the one-person show format. So, Colin, first of all, I just want to talk about the show that you're doing on tour right now. It's called The Last Best Hope. Okay. Yeah. Tell me about this, how it materialized, and are you the last best hope is what I want to know.
That's exactly right. Colin Quinn, the last best hope. And yeah, because it materialized just because, look, and I know so much of it is stand-up. Like when people say one-man show, we're stand-ups. And we're raised on stand-up, but we like to be thematic. So you can't be thematic in a comedy club for an hour. You kind of have to digress. There's a little bit of, you have to talk to the crowd. You have to deal with different situations. You can't just be thematic, which is good. Because you don't want to just stick to the script completely, because that's not how we think or want to live. So, but this new show is an extension of Red State, Blue State. It's about how this country is basically shot, by our own, hoisted by our own combination of success and, like every country has their thing. It's not like we're unique, but in our own way, how we're falling apart.
Right. Well, the show that you did before, I haven't seen this one. I'm going to go see it Thursday night, January 13th at the Wilbur Theater here in Boston. And I'm looking forward to that. But I did see the other one, your previous one, Red State, Blue State, and that was really about the divide in the country. So I'm curious, as you travel around the country, what are you seeing? Because you're in not just New York and Boston and L.A., you're all over the place. So what are you seeing around the country?
I see people that are just nobody. The whole point of the States, it's always been like this, but social media just makes everyone see it all the time. It's like having the lights on 24/7. So I just see a bunch of states that are like, no, this is not what I consider the way I want to live. And that's every state and every person. So that's an issue.
Right. So they all have their, their local desires, right? Around everything from education to taxes to the legalization of pot to everything.
To culture itself, yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Even something as simple as cursing. I remember years ago going to like somewhere in rural Indiana, and I was doing a show and just casual. I don't curse that much in my act. And this lady came up to me afterwards and she goes, "You're a real potty mouth." And I started laughing, and she was dead serious. I was like, "Oh yeah, people don't curse as much in the Midwest as they do where in some places where we hang out, you know."
Yeah, definitely. I can remember doing the Punchline in not Atlanta. It was in Columbia, South Carolina, and I got the same feedback. And I don't swear a lot either in the show.
I know you don't, yeah.
But I used the term at the time, "God damn," and that was like, this is the Bible Belt, and "God damn" is like worse than the F-bomb. It's
That's
like,
right. Like you're damning God, yeah.
highly offensive,
Yeah.
and a lot of people. People complained about it. And this was a place where people are drinking. It was a nightclub, but it
Yeah.
was also in the mid 80s in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yes.
So that's definitely one distinction. I think, would you agree that most of the country or a lot of the places that you're going to are just, angry at the media? Would you say that they look at the media as like the enemy or?
Yeah. They don't even
Yeah.
want anything to do with the media. Yeah. They want
Right.
nothing to do with it. They have their own media and that's it.
Yeah, the local news, local television. Any places in particular that you were both really well received or really not well received that come to mind?
No, I mean my whole thing is that I am by nature a both sideser. So that's the enemy of today's society, as you know. To be a both sideser is to be the ultimate sellout. But that's just my nature. So my goal is I'm giving my opinion and trying to make you laugh, and that's it. I don't care who agrees with me. I don't care who disagrees with me. I don't care who thinks I'm, a capitulator. I don't care. I advertise myself as a comedian first. So
Yeah.
if the crowd's laughing, I did my job. If they're not laughing, I didn't do it. It's very simple.
Right. And so, but that you're being true to yourself because there are two sides to most issues.
That's how I feel, yeah. But tell that to anybody in the country.
True. But you know what I love about you, not only your personality and the way you work and the commitment to your own material and your own path in comedy and entertainment and show business, but also your work ethic. I mean, you got an awesome work ethic. When you look at the number of shows you've done just in the last 5 years. In the last 5 years, what have you done in the last 5 years? You got a book out. You got a couple of one-person shows.
Couple of books, couple of shows, yeah. Well, I'm always writing for some reason. It became like almost like an OCD thing in a good way, where I'm always like, when I have free time, I just feel like writing. I love
And
writing.
so do you have a certain time of day that you do it? Do you get up and say, I got to do 10 to 11 or?
No, if I did that, I'd be better off. But I just always feel like it's almost like a form of clarity to me, where I'm like, what am I thinking about? What's going on? I start writing, and I'm like, oh, that's how I feel about that. It's the strangest thing. I can't articulate my feelings about what goes on in the world unless I write it first.
Interesting. So you won't have a preconceived conclusion until you put it on paper?
I still don't have a conclusion. I mean, if you look at the history of the world, this is just one of 10,000 preludes to war that have happened in history.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is just our version of a breakup, a war, whether it's a civil war or England and France. This is what happens when people disagree and they're close enough to each other to fight. And that's what I worry about. I feel like we're going to end up being like the West Bank all over the country.
Right. People really divided. Colin, so, but in your process, okay, so you're writing almost every day, would you say?
Yeah.
So you get an idea, you do it on a laptop, are you old school writing on a legal pad?
Laptop. I do a laptop, but if I go to work it out, then I write it on the cards
Yeah,
because just so I can say, oh, get the main thought down there. But because my laptop is full with thousands of rants, it
right.
looks like Ted Kaczynski probably has a cleaner laptop than I do. It's probably more clear.
Right.
But that's how it is. Yeah.
Right. So, for example, red state, blue state, how
Right.
long did that take you to come up with? And then when did you start working on this new show? Because that's what intrigues me about your process. You keep, like, even though you're doing red state, blue state, you're working on a new show while you're performing the old one.
Well, yeah, because a lot of the material that I cut out of Red State, Blue State, I'm like, oh, could this be part of that new show, and do I have to just rework it?
Yeah.
But as you know, how many hours you have of material you never used? You
Yeah.
used it twice, right? So there's all that stuff too. So I try to rummage through that sometimes and get some stuff. So once in a while, I'll have a bit that's from 100 years ago, and then I'll just get a line out of it from now that could be. So how it is. It's a strange business because there's nobody ever set up maybe by the nature of how we are, nobody ever said, here's stand-up comedy done the right way. Here are the rules of stand-up. It's
Right.
the one business that does not have any of that.
Right. Which is liberating, but also can be challenging to find your way in the business.
Because we're also ADD.
Right. So, Colin, so you come up with these ideas, then you'll start going. You have a favorite place in New York. Is it the Cellar?
Cellar. Yeah, I love going to the cellar. And then you got to go up there with your notes and you got to bomb a little bit,
Yeah.
To work out new stuff. I can't do it without bombing a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
Looking
very
at my
painful.
notes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the way it is. But
I know.
I do enough old stuff to make sure that they get laughs too.
Right. Right. I think that's that's about the hardest challenge. I think breaking out new stuff is knowing that you're going to stammer through it and it's not going to work perfectly the first
Right.
time. But if you can get one laugh out of like 2 minutes out of that thought, then you got something anyway.
But here's the other thing. What you just said is one of the most important things in stand-up. The one thing there's two things in my opinion that can ruin your comedy set. One is fear. You can never have fear. You can never be embarrassed or scared when you're doing stand-up. And the other one is you can't stammer. Now, as you know, I stammer. My whole career is stammering. So I feel like I have to really write material because I stammer naturally. But if they feel like you're stammering in a joke, even if you've gotten, I've had it happen where you're doing a joke and you've done it 20 times and it kills. And then there's one time for whatever distraction you stammer, it never works. So when you said stammer, that really hit me.
Yeah.
When people
Well,
get nervous on stage, they'll stammer, and then the audience just shuts down.
they sense fear.
They sense
They sense lack of confidence, and if he's not confident, well, I'm not going to be confident in laughing at it.
You do. I always tell comedians, I go, young ones, I go, you do not have the indulgence of feeling scared. No matter where you are, no matter who's coming at you, you're not allowed to be scared.
And even if you are, what do you do to overcome that fear? I mean, I think most of us have, that's not stage fright, but you got to get in the zone
adrenaline,
to
but-
go on stage, like
No,
you're
but
going
I
up to bat.
I guess I shouldn't say fear. I should say you never have the indulgence to be uncomfortable. So if I'm in a room and there's 30 people watching me and they're all people that hate me, my biggest enemies of my history of my life, watching me, I can't feel ashamed or uncomfortable. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
have to go, guess what? I don't care. I'm doing this and I'm going to be what I consider funny.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't get one laugh for an hour, I'm not going to ever flinch and be like, oh, guys, I'm sorry, this is awkward. No. That's it.
Colin, one of the things I wanted to just thank you for and bring up, and one of the things that we we kind of bonded on early on is when we did meet, and there was a it was a big drinking scene in Boston, and I was
Oh,
a big drinker and everything. And you said to me, you said, Jimmy, your problem is your problem in this business is alcohol. You said if you ever quit drinking, I'll never forget this. You said if you ever quit drinking, you could be a really big star. And I remember thinking, a star. If I become a really big star, I can drink all I want.
yeah.
And I remember thinking that, but nobody, it's the type of business that's kind of competitive, and your peers don't really say that to you. And especially if they're drinking a lot too, they're not
Oh,
recognizing that. But you had some clarity of mind, and I got to tell you, that one thing was like a complete change in my perspective towards the business and towards my own life and career. So I just really wanted to thank you for that. And I know I've thanked you a million times, but I
yeah.
always want to thank you because it was so important just to lend some unsolicited advice to somebody that you saw that was having a hard time.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, and of course it helps me too, as we both know.
Yeah,
That's how it works. But also I had already quit drinking for a couple of years, and in those days, no, very few people were sober.
right.
And I went up to Boston, and I was there for about 2 days, and I said, "Thank God I didn't start comedy here. I would have been dead by 1986. There's no way I would have lasted in that scene
Yeah.
because it was, people. You walk in, people are just on stage. The audience is doing coke. The whole place was a madhouse. Everybody's drinking. Forget about drinking, coke everywhere. So yeah, when I saw you, I was like, "Oh, this guy's so funny and so charismatic and so smart." But you were, even for that scene, you stood out as a guy that people were like, "Oh yeah, he's in bad shape."
Yeah, and you reached out, and I just appreciate that, man.
Oh, of course.
It's just a life-changing conversation, and it was just kind of off the cuff too. One of the things, Colin, I'm trying to do with this podcast and this show is we try to find. I started a social enterprise a few years ago, Humor for Humanity, where you can actually use entertainment and comedy and the one-person shows or podcasts for purposes beyond just the entertainment value. So
Right.
for the people watching or listening tonight or today, wherever you are, we're going to have a link here in the show notes that you can make a donation to a sober house here in Malden, Massachusetts. A friend of mine started it a few years ago. This is an interesting thing, Colin. This gentleman, for years, he worked for the post office. We call him Pat the Mailman. He worked for the post office for like 35 years. He retired. He said, "I've always wanted to start a sober house for guys, in this case, men, coming out of early recovery." And not all of them have the money to, you have to pay for these sober houses. Unfortunately, there's different, formulas for each one. But anyway, this one, anything we raise is going to go to scholarships for people who want to get sober, need a place to stay, but don't have the bank accounts because so many people have burnt their bridges just
Right.
professionally and with their family lives. So
God,
the name of the, yeah. Yeah, so that link to the Humor for Humanity will be in
Yeah.
the show notes here. And so, Colin, I am excited. So thank you again for that. And thanks for your support of this show and Humor for Humanity. We'd love you to come back,
I would
next
love to
time
come back.
yeah, next time you're coming through Boston, we'd love to have you talk about some other subjects. But anything else you want to let us know, Colin, about either your process or the new show, or what do you hope for people to take away from your shows?
I mean, honestly, I'm hoping that if I could get to a point to really have solutions, because comedy's fun, because so many comedians, they do their act and there's a solution sometimes in their joke, and I'm like, that would actually work. And that's the fun part too, as you know, of comedy. I remember you were famous for always saying, "How about do this, take this group and put them there," and
Yeah.
you would have all those, and that's the kind of stuff that I love in comedy personally, and you always had those great ones. And by the way, one of the best jokes it wasn't the solution one, but it was in that same set where you go, "Folks, nobody wants to register for a gun. It takes 2 weeks to get a phone."
Right.
And but that's what I love about humor is instead of somebody scolding people, you're going, "Here's how I feel, but here's why you're listening to me." Because anybody can say, "I disagree with this." making people laugh and going, oh yeah, it does take a long time to get a phone.
Yeah. Right. Back in the 80s, they were
But that's
arguing
funny.
about us. They were arguing about a 7-day waiting period
Right.
to get a gun. And I was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I said, folks, a 7-day waiting period to get a gun, it takes 3 weeks to get a phone. And it's like one of those things that makes sense,
Yes.
and the audience can hear it.
Yes, because it's funny. You're not talking down to people or scolding them or acting like I know the answer. You're like, look, I'm just telling you my viewpoint, and it's going to be funny, and it's going to make sense.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff. When you hit those moments, you feel great,
Right.
But it has to be funny too, or else, like I said, anybody that goes up, anybody that goes on stage and scolds the crowd, I feel like it's taking advantage of your position and false advertising, because the sign outside says comedian, so the description of a comedian is to elicit laughter. That's what a comedian is. It's not to the highest form may be to also say what you want to say, but the first, like doctors first do no harm, first get laughs. So when comedians are up there using the pulpit, advertise yourself as a philosopher if you're not planning on getting laughs. You're planning on lecturing people. That's how I feel.
Do you think when I listen to certain comics, especially a lot of the black comics, Chris Rock, Chappelle, they have insights into being black, and gay comics, insights to being gay, as Hispanic, new immigrants, insights to that life, and that those lived experiences. It seems to me that it's a great service when somebody's bringing something up that the general public might not even be aware of, but once you say it, it's like, aha, oh, I get it now. And I
Sure.
think, do you think, so I guess the larger question is, do you think that it's, comedy can actually help heal the country rather than divide us? Do you think we can, get to the point where we're trying to make a concerted effort to do better and to actually unite people around certain issues rather than drive us apart?
No, because it's still your lifestyle and your opinion. You know what I mean?
Right.
That doesn't mean it doesn't even with Chappelle, Chris Rock, their insights don't even apply to all black people. Don't necessarily identify with what they're saying. So why would everybody in the country? It's still people are still individuals.
Yeah.
So there's no sweeping truth for everybody in the world, or even in the country, or even in a comedy club. So that's the problem with life.
Right. But when you have 1,000 people in a theater laughing at the same time, even though, you have people on the red states and blue states, Republicans, Democrats, whatever, if they're, at least for that moment, they're united in a common agreement that something is funny.
I think that those days are over, but I do believe they existed. Now I see in comedy clubs, when you bring up subjects of consequence,
Yeah.
you see everybody get almost a fixed look before they hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know what you're saying. Humor has a better shot than anything. But in the grand scheme of things, I wish that was true. So far, it has not been proven to be true. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like everybody's like, yes, that was a show, and I appreciated the insight, but it's not world-changing wisdom in my life.
Yeah.
It's your life and the way you see things. I've had this experience, I've had this happen, and I have this obstacle here. So while I love it and I know what you're saying, it's not my exact truth. It's close enough where I can laugh at it, but it's not my aha moment of my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what I found interesting, and tell me if you have a similar experience. You can lose a crowd really quickly on the same bit that does really well just by mentioning a trigger word, just by mentioning a personality or a name,
Yes.
or a label. You can say the word Republican and lose half the crowd. You can say the word Democrat and lose the other half.
Yeah.
You can. I mean, it was especially true with the former president, but also the Obama the same way, Hillary the same way, Bill Clinton the same way, Obamacare, anything that it elicits that reaction where the steel door comes down and they can't hear it. So the trick is, one of the tactics is, don't mention those words. Go into the material without mentioning those people or those words.
Right. Or sometimes you have to overly mention it and go, look, I know everybody argues over this.
Yeah, right.
But like now you almost have to preface things in a certain way so then people are like, okay, because people are almost afraid you're trying to slip something in on them too. So it's a very depressing time, in my opinion,
Yeah.
as far as this kind of stuff. But look, it's the way it is right now. That's how it is. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. How has your show been received? How many have you done so far of the new show?
Very, very poorly. If I get 3 laughs in an hour, that's good.
Well, folks, you want to rush to get tickets because it's coming to a town near you, and don't hesitate. He gets 3 laughs in 90 minutes. This is your chance. So, but seriously, how has it been received so far?
It's great, but like you said, we noticed a little nuance of like, why do you have to be tense right now? I haven't even said anything. I just used some word, And so it is. It's like, and there's 1,000. It's not just those political people. There's 1,000 words where people get a little bit like, where's this going? What's going on? And I can't even blame them, because if they laugh at the wrong thing and their HR is in the audience, they're going to get fired. So it's even that's involved too. Everything's crazy. I don't know.
You know what, Colin? You'll appreciate this. The election of the campaign of 2016, the presidential campaign, I was booked for like 4 or 5 dates, corporate events around the country. In Florida, and the name of the show, they wanted political humor. They thought they wanted political humor, okay? So the show I was doing was Jimmy Tingle for President, and say, oh, this will be great, this will be anyway. So I got booked in Florida, Texas, Arizona, Southern California, and Northern California. And I have to tell you, and like you said, this isn't the general public. These are corporations, and they're there for their company picnic or whatever outing. Right. And you're doing their thing, so they're naturally tense anyway, and they're inhibited in terms of, like you said, the HR department's looking at them, or the CEO's there, or their boss, and so they're tense anyway. So I'm doing my thing, and this is how I learned about the certain words, how you can just alienate a whole crowd. So I inadvertently was not doing as well on stage as I could do. That's as simple as that. Yeah. But I could feel a tenseness and the audience recoiling from what I was saying. And every gig, I'm saying, geez, what am I doing wrong? And I finally got up to Bakersfield, California. I was actually in Kevin McCarthy's district in Bakersfield, California. And it's, he's the guy from the Republican minority leader of the House right now. Anyway, I'm in his district, and they're all ranchers, And I said to the woman who picked me up at the station, I said, how is this audience, how are they demographically? I'm thinking it's 50-50. It's California. Yeah. It's 50. She goes, oh, we're heavy Trump country, very, very Trump country, very strong Trump country. I said, really? She goes, yeah. She goes, this is the largest, I'm paraphrasing, but she said, this is the largest concentration of Christian schools in the country. Wow. And I said, oh, really? So I took that information. I had like 3 hours before I go on. I go, how am I going to deal with, 300-400 ranchers who are heavily Christian? And what I ended up doing is I did all this personal stuff, growing up Catholic, trying to quit drinking, using, the higher power to help me quit drinking. All these things that were personal that had nothing to do with politics so much, but a personal connection to them.
Yes.
And by the time I got to, immigration, which they support immigration reform, they're all ranchers. That's who's working on all these farms.
Yes.
By the time I got to those issues, they could hear me. And they could
Yes.
appreciate where I was coming from. And at the end of it, I don't want to leave my first podcast blowing my own horn, Colin, but by the end of the show, there was a standing ovation. That's all I'm going to say.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
But I mean, the personal story can go a long way, even though the material on the outside might seem very, very political. And when you're coming from your own experience, then it means it can just resonate with people more so than just the punditry.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. So, Colin, I'm looking forward to seeing your show this Thursday night in Boston, January 13th. Folks, if you are in another state, and I hope you are listening, or another city, the show, The Last Best Hope, starring Colin Quinn, is touring the country, and he's going to be doing it. How long are you going to be doing it for? How many more months?
I don't know. A few. Who the hell knows?
Great. So he'll be out there in the country. Go to colinquinn.com. That's where you can find out his schedule. He's a great guy, a great comic, a really unique voice in this very divided time. And as you said, he's coming from personal experience, but he's also coming from there's two sides to every issue. And he might not think it, but I think it, that comedy and humor and goodwill can help unite this nation, ladies and gentlemen. Colin Quinn, I love you. Thank you so much for being here for the first Tingle podcast.
Thanks, buddy.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.